Congratulations, if you're watching this video, you made it to your fantasy football finals, and we were there for you. We hope to be there for you again this weekend. So I brought in Michael Fabiano, our senior fantasy analyst, to help you set your ideal fantasy football championship lineup to take it all home this weekend. Fabs, here we are. This is for all the marbles. Quarterback position. Who should we definitely start this week?
I'm going to stick with Justin Fields. I got a lot of questions about him last week, and listen, he had a stink bomb, all right? He had a bad game, 9.9 fantasy points, but he's got the Lions this week. This is a great matchup. The last time he played the Lions, he beat them for nearly 40 fantasy points. No team in the National Football League has given up more points to quarterbacks than Detroit. So keep the faith in Fields, and let's start Jared Goff. I mean, last week he was really good on the road, his first really good performance away from Ford Field, but now he's back at home in Detroit against the Bears. And they've allowed an average of nearly 24 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. Believe it or not, Jen Piacenti, Jared Goff could lead you to a fantasy football championship.
It's crazy, but it's true. And by the way, this game has the highest game total of the week right now at SI Sportsbook. It's 51.5, so they're expecting a lot of points, and that's really good news for fantasy owners. All right, to the quarterback position sit list. You say no-go for Geno Smith or Aaron Rodgers this week.
Yeah, and we'll start with Geno, who's got the revenge game narrative, of course, going up against the Jets. But Geno's had a couple of stinkers in a row. And I wonder if that carriage is turning into a pumpkin. And the Jets defense is very tough against quarterbacks, right? So Geno is a guy that, honestly, I would cut this week and pick up maybe a defense to block your opponent if you're good at the quarterback position. And then Aaron Rodgers. The matchup's great this week. But you know what? It was really good last week, too, against the Dolphins. It was actually better than it was against Minnesota, and he did nothing. Aaron Rodgers has had 2 good games all year, and I want to play him in the Fantasy Football Championship. Even if the matchup is right, I'm not going there. There are better options than Aaron Rodgers. Despite the good matchup, I am fading him. He is not trustworthy.
Do you remember a few weeks ago when it was time to just drop Cam Akers? Like, he maybe wasn't even going to play again this season. And last week, he ousted a lot of teams from their fantasy football semifinals because he was just dominant. You say go ahead, fire him up this week. And also, you got a guy here that's on my waiver wire list.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll start off with Cam Akers, who was tremendous. You want to talk about a nice Christmas gift? There you go. 3 touchdowns. He's averaging 19 fantasy points in his last 4 games. He's seeing most of the backfield touches at about 45% clip in the last 2 weeks. The Chargers have allowed the 8th most points to running backs in that Battle of Los Angeles. Cam Akers is a flex, and he's a really good one. And now Tyler Algier, who I can't believe was available in around 50% of leagues on Yahoo heading into the week. But he's got a really good matchup this week against the Cardinals. I mean, only the Colts have given up more fantasy points to running backs in the last 4 weeks. And Algier is seeing about a 35% touch share over the last 2 weeks. He is a strong flex, maybe even an RB2 in this very positive matchup.
This is kind of how the fantasy football finals work. I love that now we're going to go to your sit list, and you've got 2 guys who were drafted in the 1st and 2nd round. And you know, and we just talked about Cam Akers and Tyler Algier might be the ones to help lead you to a fantasy championship, but you say Najee Harris and Alvin Kamara, be careful.
Be careful, right. Listen, I know you got to play both of them. I get it. Like, I have to play them too. But in DFS, I'm avoiding them, and the matchups are not good. Right? I mean, Harris is going to be tough to sit. I understand that. You just got to temper expectations against the Ravens. I don't think that this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be a defensive battle. Neither quarterback is very good in this contest. And the Ravens have allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs overall. So beware Najee Harris. And beware Alvin Kamara. And last week, he finally had a good game, Jen. He had 19 points. Pretty good, right? But he had failed to score more than 12.4 points in his previous 4 games, and he's been held to single digits 4 of his last 8 games. And what I fear in this game is that the Eagles are going to boat race the Saints. It's going to be a negative game script, and they don't throw the ball to Kamara anymore. So he is an RB2 at best this week, maybe a flex at worst. He's still startable, but the matchup is not good. And remember, the Eagles have all those interior defensive linemen back, so they're not as terrible against the run as they were maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Why they don't throw the ball to Kamara just astounds me, especially with their limitations at receiver. It's just truly one of the things that has been the most surprising to me this year in the fantasy football season. Okay, moving over to wide receiver, Big Mike and Keenan Allen have both been phenomenal lately with Justin Herbert healthy, and this week they're in a Battle of Los Angeles where they get to be the home team.
Yeah, what's going on with Justin Herbert, by the way? If that's not proof that a quarterback can stink and his wide receivers can still put up good numbers, I don't know what is. But yeah, the Rams are very bad against perimeter receivers. I know Jalen Ramsey is considered one of the top cover corners in the National Football League, but overall the Rams have given up the second most catches and the third most points to the perimeter. So Mike Williams is going to be in a lot of lineups. And then Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is not putting up like massive numbers, right? But at least his floor is still double digits, right? 12, 13 points. But I like the matchup against Carolina this week. The Panthers have allowed the 6th most points to slot receivers and the 5th most points to wide receivers overall. And if you watch Tom Brady, Jen, he doesn't throw the ball deep anymore. Last week, it was all dinks and dunks, and those dinks and dunks went to Leonard Fournette and Chris Godwin. So I'm going to start Godwin this week with confidence.
You don't like the way things are going for Trace McSorley in Arizona is my guess here, because you got Marquise Brown on the sit list. And also, though we do like Brock Purdy as a potential waiver wire add, you're not super high on Brandon Ayuk this week.
And we'll start with Hollywood. And I had him as a sit last week. He's playing with a third-string quarterback. I just, listen, Trace McSorley, I'm sure, is a wonderful human being. He's just not a great NFL quarterback, and he doesn't throw the ball downfield very much. So you can't trust Hollywood Brown in the championship week. And Atlanta, believe it or not, no touchdowns and the fewest fantasy points allowed to perimeter receivers since week 13. So they stepped it up a little bit. And then you mentioned Brandon Ayuk. I understand people are going to have to play him. But his numbers haven't been great lately, right? Single-digit fantasy points in 2 of his last 4 games. He's got the Raiders this week. They've allowed 3 touchdowns and the 6th fewest fantasy points to perimeter receivers. So it's actually not a great matchup. And Purdy's been going to George Kittle a ton, which, by the way, thank you. I have Kittle in a couple of championship rosters this week. So Ayuk is more of a risk, even with Deebo Samuel still banged up.
It's definitely been the George Kittle show. I'm in a finals, and I looked at my opponent has George Kittle, and it's probably the player that struck the most fear into me. So, yes, it has been the George Kittle show. Sorry. Brandon Ayuk, you probably needs to stay on your bench if possible. All right, moving to the tight end position. Obviously, you're starting George Kittle, but Tyler Higbee and Cole Kmet. Tyler Higbee, I'm assuming because, again, same kind of situation, a newer quarterback targeting his tight end, and Cole Kmet, wow, that matchup with Detroit could not be much better.
Higbee looked like he was dead in the water a few weeks ago, right? When they were playing backup and third-string quarterbacks in LA. Now they have Baker Mayfield. Listen, Baker Mayfield's no great shakes, but he's way better than what they had, right? So I'm going to play Higbee because Mayfield is looking in his direction. 43.1 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Had multiple touchdowns last week, over 30 points. Playing the Lightning Bolts, by the way, in the Battle of Los Angeles or Hollywood. And because the position is thin and Higbee's getting opportunities now, he's certainly worth a look. He'll be a top 10 tight end. And then Cole Kmet, who I've been saying to sit for the last few weeks, and he hadn't been great, but this is a really good matchup against Detroit. They've allowed the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends. And the last time Kmet played the Lions, 23.4 points. That was back in week 10. Start Cole Kmet.
And again, remember, this game, highest total on SI Sportsbook, 51.5 right now. So that game is juicy for your fantasy team. All right, you got big names on your sit list here. Mark Andrews and David Njoku. You say, if possible, don't start him.
If possible. And I have been telling people for weeks not to play Andrews because he's just not the same player. And then I said, well, I like him last week against Atlanta. And he did nothing. Again. Against Atlanta. My voice is going up because I'm still shocked. I can't play him. How do you play Mark Andrews right now? Right? I mean, the guy's averaging 7 points a game in his last 8 games. And the last time he played the Steelers, he had 3.7 points. I get it. It's Mark Andrews. It's not the 2021 version of Mark Andrews. If you have another alternative, I'm sitting Mark Andrews. And I've been saying that for a long time outside of last week, and I was wrong. Now, David Njoku. The last couple of games, 5.8 points and 3.4. That's not good. And he's only had 5 catches in those games combined. Now he's got the Commanders. They've allowed just 2 tight ends to score more than 11.6 points against them, and all but 3 have been held to single digits. And Njoku is not clicking with Deshaun Watson on a consistent basis. So Njoku, even though he's one of the most talented tight ends in fantasy on what's a very short list, I would look for alternatives this week.
It's tough to switch quarterbacks in the middle of a season, but I guess a lot of teams have done that. And you're right, Njoku and Watson don't seem to have the connection. But this is it. This is the finals. You have the connection to si.com/fantasy. And we're going to have rankings up for you, updated on a daily basis. We're going to watch those practice reports. We're going to give you the best info possible. Be sure to hit the subscribe button here, and we'll keep the information coming. Visit us at si.com/fantasy, and good luck. Let's bring home the ship.